Hello, good afternoon. It's Thursday afternoon, it's 4 p.m. and welcome to teissTalk. I'm your host, Jeff White, author and investigative journalist, joining you from the glorious environs of wherever it is I now am. Apologies, not in my usual study at home, don't have the fancy teissTalk backdrop, but I am out and about, unleashed on the road in this glamorous venue on what is a momentous day in British history, it has to be said. I was talking to a panelist just before coming on air, and it is absolutely bonkers. I can honestly tell you, in the 20 years I've worked in journalism, I don't think I've ever had a situation where I genuinely had no idea what was going to happen the next day or the day after that. You cover these news stories, and you usually got even when things were bad for Boris Johnson, you kind of thought, well, okay, this is going to happen, then that's going to. There's a process at least to things. With this, I have no idea what's going to happen next. All I do know is we're facing a day when a lettuce has actually beaten the British Prime Minister in terms of longevity. For those of you who haven't been following this, and I appreciate some of our panelists are based overseas in the US, as are some of possibly our audience, the Daily Star, the august tabloid newspaper in the UK, which I have to say does a fantastic line in headlines. The Daily Star's front pages are actually something to see. The Daily Star very early on pitched a lettuce that they bought from the supermarket against Liz Truss. To see which would last longer. And I kind of thought, well, that's an interesting journalistic ploy, because clearly at some stage they're going to have to admit defeat and throw the lettuce away. But remarkably, the lettuce has lasted longer than Liz Truss has. And thousands of people, more than 12,000 Twitter users, tuned in to the Daily Star's Twitter page, to watch the lettuce declare victory over Liz Truss. You've got to look for some moments of levity in times like this. Hello to, yes, Benjamin's got the link there. If you want to click on it, click on the Daily Star's website. I'm sure they'd be glad of the traffic. But listen, folks, welcome to those of you who are joining us, who are regular attendees. I see some of you coming in the chat already. Hello to all of you who are new. If you're watching Tice for the first time, do say hello in the chat. We love new people here. The chat window is yours to do with as you wish, within the bounds of legality and libel laws. So please do drop your messages, drop your comments in there. We love to hear from attendees at teissTalk. We're also giving away some swag. We've got a teissTalk mug to give away, which we usually do on the show. I'm going to give that mug to whoever can guess where I am. It's in the UK. I haven't travelled abroad. It's in the UK. I will give some clues as we go along, and you might get a mug if you win. Benjamin apparently says he put £20 on the lettuce winning. If that's true, Benjamin, please say that's true, because I'd love it if somebody actually did bet. And there we go. So if you can guess where I am, it is in the UK. Have a guess. I'll try and narrow it down throughout the course of the show. We might get a winner at the end who gets the mug. Also, by the way, if you're listening to the podcast version of teissTalk, of course, if you're out on a run or something like that, you'll be getting the reduced version. But if you want the full version, do look at the teissTalk website, where the entire program in all its glory, the whole 40 minutes or so, is put up there for you. You can see our lovely faces. And all of the teissTalks are also archived on our teiss.co.uk website. So if you want to go along there and visit, you can do. I do the Thursday afternoons at 4. Jenny does the Tuesday afternoons at 4. Oh, good spot from Robert Welton. It does look like the Parcel Yard pub in King's Cross, where I've actually filmed. I filmed in the Parcel Yard pub. It's a whole other anecdote I won't go into for Channel 4 News. But no, it's not the Parcel Yard pub. I will tell you, it is east of the pub in London that you're talking about, but quite far east. So that doesn't really narrow it down. Look, good stuff. Avi says CNN, Avi, one of our panelists, actually said CNN did comment that the cat hanging around town Downing Street outlasted both Boris Johnson and Liz Truss. It's true. The cat has 9 lives. And at this rate, by the time we get to the next general election, we might have had 9 prime ministers. But look, enough. Stick your jokes in the chat. Stick your pitches to become Prime Minister. Stick your pitches for where I am. The chat is all yours to get involved with. But we should probably move on to the business of the day, which is far more pressing. Our Tice panel today is going to be talking about, as an industry-focused panel, we did one last week on aviation, which I really enjoyed, learned loads about aviation that scared the pants off me and made me never want to fly again. We are talking about healthcare institutions and how they protect their data from cyber threats. It's a great panel joining us. I'm going to welcome them now. Switching on their webcams is Kate Mullin, who's CISO at Cancer Treatment Centers of America Global, Richard Stainings, who's teaching professor at the University of Denver, Jim Brady, VP and CISO, Cybersecurity and Risk Management at Fairview Health Services, and Avi Avivi, Chief Information Security Officer, CISO at Safe Breach. Welcome to all of you. Kate, I'm going to come to you first, just before we go on to this topic, and just get a view from the US. Is this being reported in US media at all, what's going on in the UK, and what's the sort of overall gist and impression you guys have?
So yes, it is in the news and the press, and of course, Twitter has been just having too much fun with it. Um, and yeah, we are kind of wondering what's going on over there because you've had so many significant changes, and we're about to have an election here in the States, and you guys are taking over all the news. So thank you. We appreciate it. We really do.
Indeed. Avi, can I come to you next? Just for those who don't know, SafeBreach, give us the once-over on SafeBreach. What does the company do and how big is it, etc.?
Sure, we're one of the pioneers in the breach attack simulation vertical. We basically allow or help our customers validate their security controls.
Right, okay.
We're fairly small, but we're one of the leaders in the market.
And how much does health form part of that? Have you got many health clients? Are you
Absolutely, yeah. Our number one vertical is financial for obvious reasons, but number two is health.
Good. All right, thanks for that, Avi. Jim, can I come to you? Fairview, again, just the once over for those who don't know the company.
Sure. Hello, everybody. So Fairview is part of a partnership called mHealth Fairview. We're located in Minnesota in the U.S. We are a hospital, clinic, and pharmacy system, about $7 billion in revenue, over 1 million patients. Let me see, we've got about 34,000 employees, 10 hospitals and 12 clinics, and we're on the customer side, obviously.
Yeah. Good. Sorry to interrupt there, Jim. No, that's a good overview and quite substantial. And obviously, for both yourself and Kate, really obviously very much in the thick of it. Richard, I want to come to you next. You're an expat in Denver, so I wonder, going back to the politics side, how are you explaining this to your US friends?
It's an interesting dilemma to be in, wearing two different hats. You see things from both perspectives, but I think the dry British sense of humour is lost on quite a few of my American friends, put it that way.
You should really confuse them by sending them Daily Star's front page or the Daily Star's feed. I'm not sure what they'd make of the lettuce.
I think I will, now that Ben's put the link in the chat. So I've already secured it in another tab here. So I'll be viewing that and sending it out.
Good stuff. Yeah, something to take the time away today. Another time sponge. University of Denver, by the way. So what does your teaching remit include, and how much does healthcare form part of that?
So I'm part of the University College. University of Denver is a collegial university. It's the oldest in the Rocky Mountains area of the United States. And the University College focuses really upon master's level programs, and I'm privileged to teach cybersecurity, ICT, and health informatics at the University of Denver. So good program, yeah. And we're entirely online. So.
Oh, cool. Okay, great. And obviously health informatics, very relevant to what we're going to be discussing today. Thanks, folks. Do put your comments in the chat, by the way, our audience. We're keen to hear your insights, both from the stuff that's coming from healthcare and also asking questions of the healthcare folks we're chatting to see what their insights are. We're going to look first at a news story that popped up, catching our eye. Obviously, this was a couple of months ago, but it's a big report from IBM. This is in SC Media. The fantastic Jessica Davis, who is the voice of healthcare, cybersecurity and policy, it says here, for SC Media, written an article titled Healthcare Data Breaches Cost an Average of $10.1 million, more than any other industry. Kate, you've had a look at this. Can I come to you first? I mean, what did this surprise you? Or?
No, not at all. And the thing is that, by the way, that article was very US focused in terms of the citations about breaches, but ransomware and its financial impacts are international, and the UK runs right behind the US in terms of its hits and impacts. So one of the things is that a lot of the technology within healthcare is older, and as new technology comes in to treat and help patients, frequently those older systems are not replaced. Sometimes manufacturers are still selling stuff that is running on XP and NT. And when you have those, when a manufacturer is only selling on an obsolete operating system, right, you have all kinds of considerations. And then the other thing is, all of these systems have to talk to each other because we have electronic health record systems that are getting data feeds from what we call IOMT, the Internet of Medical Things. So we have a much more complex environment without the revenue stream to address the vulnerabilities.
That's interesting. Yeah, because what I want to drill into is this issue of why healthcare. It's the interesting thing about the article is it's the figure. It's $10 million, and there's lots of dynamics around that. And one of them, as he's correctly isolated, is healthcare often has to buy kit that isn't necessarily supported. But Richard, I just wanted,
well, the thing is, they don't tend to invest until after it happens.
Yeah. Rich, can I come to you on this? I mean, it's worth pointing out, by the way, to Kate's point about the different regions that this study included. There's a list actually on IBM's report. They got around various different countries. But Richard, obviously, the points Kate's made is one of them. What else would feed into a higher breach cost for healthcare than other industries, do you think?
I think it comes down to the obviously the legal ramifications of breaches. The US is highly litigious, so the class action lawsuits far outweigh the punitive slap on the wrist fines from regulators, and that makes it that much more expensive in the US. But I think there's a bigger concern here, and Kate alluded to this, which is the growing threat surface of healthcare. As we have introduced more and more technology, more electronic interoperability, more connectivity, so the threat surface has increased, and this gives perpetrators opportunities to attack the network, to find an open spot, and to whittle their way in.
Yeah. But actually, Richard, going back to your first point, so that's interesting. So the insurance picture, because obviously healthcare in the US is slightly different, certainly very different to the UK, actually. Yeah. Going back to the insurance picture, you seem to be suggesting that might be a driver of it, that when there's an issue at a healthcare company, there are insurers who will take action. There are lawyers, frankly, who will get people who've been affected. Do you see that feeding into it in the US? Have you seen evidence of that?
The class action lawsuits definitely feed into the overall cost of a data breach, right? The biggest costs now really are restitution of services, loss of revenue as a result of being down, and the impact to the community because no one can go see their doctor or their specialist for often many weeks, right? We've had a number of significant breaches in the US, one that's going on right now amongst one of the biggest healthcare systems here. We've had one in Southern California last year or the year before last, I forget the dates now, that basically prevented people from going to see their doctor unless they were prepared to go drive 100 miles. These are impactful, and this is why healthcare is considered a critical infrastructure industry in the United States, the UK, and many other places.
Yeah, of course. Jim, can I come to you on this? Obviously, again, you run hospitals. When you read this article, did it surprise you? Did sort of because it's not the first time healthcare is featured quite highly in the figures.
No, and it just healthcare is a very highly targeted area, and I've looked over some of the stats on that. Some of the research in the U.S. Is doing on healthcare breaches, and they're definitely going up. The number of records is up 205% over the last 12 months. The number of breaches is up 25%. So it kind of aligns with the article. And then hacking is the main cause, so it's not happened by accident. And to Kate's point, we have a lot of end-of-life equipment that with many vendors that's regulated by a different agency than in the U.S. than normal IT systems are, and that's called the FDA. And so what it means is that it's hard to protect many of these IoT devices that are on our network are the machines that are in the hospital rooms, et cetera. So, but it's a good note. It's a good comment about the zero trust, that's a little bit less. Zero trust is very difficult to implement in a medium to large size healthcare system, simply because of the complexity, and we have mergers and all the medical equipment. But I do believe that if you can implement macro segmentation and micro segmentation and start working your way there, then it's going to reduce the probability of an attack being successful.
Yeah.
Thanks. Reduce the cost.
Thanks, Jim, for bringing that up. You preempted me, the zero trust point, one I was going to bring up actually with Avi, because the august folks at IBM do say, the report, it says here, the report also showed breaches cost more for entities without zero trust policies. Avi, I mean, you're working with some healthcare providers and financial institutions as well. Do you support Jim in that? Have you tried to get zero trust in at healthcare, and has it proved that struggle?
Yes, I mean, zero trust for the most part is a term, right? At the end of the day, it's nothing new in the approach. It's as much as it is summary of principles that need to be implemented. But just to go back to the previous point, I also want to say that the healthcare industry is a little bit different than other industries in that the cost actually also translates to people's lives, right? If a hospital is being held at ransom, that ransom may be preventing them from providing services to real people, to patients. And so the options of not paying the ransom are not as they are in other industries. Now, going back to the zero trust, as Jim pointed correctly, is that it's not a simple thing to implement, right? It basically states, look, regardless of where you are, we don't necessarily trust where you're coming from. We need to do some positive authentication of who you are, that you only access what you need to access. And when implementing that, being able to actually validate that you're not able to go to places you shouldn't go is not easy.
And Avi, just to go to the point, I mean, in healthcare, are there particular challenges? I mean, Jim's hinted at them already. Are there particular challenges in implementing? Because you've done a good job there describing what zero trust would be, but heart of healthcare?
I think so. Absolutely. I mean, it's a challenge for any organization that has grown organically from the old days of the internet to the new ones. We were used to flat networks with, no real segregation of functionality. All the users could access everything from anywhere within that network. And so that means that in order to truly apply zero trust, you need to make some massive changes.
Yeah. It's interesting. Thanks for that, Avi. One of the things, actually, Kate, coming back to you, that I spotted in this report, because I won't lie, I didn't read the entire report. However, I did scan. I scanned for the healthcare stuff. One of the things I was interested by was it does reveal, this is 550 organizations that IBM asked about this, and they did a whole bunch of surveys with practitioners as well. But the number of healthcare providers they actually surveyed was, I think, 1% of that total 550. So that would be, 25-ish healthcare providers. Now, I'm sure IBM have done work to try and balance that out and to make sure that they've reflected it fairly. But Kate, isn't this one of the problems with sort of reporting on healthcare and reporting on breaches? There are loads and loads and loads of financial companies, but healthcare providers, there tend to be some big ones, and surely the different answers from different ones can skew a survey like this. What do you think?
Well, the thing is that, interestingly, I'm a healthcare CISO. I change jobs every couple of years and have worked in a lot of different healthcare organizations, and every single one of them is a completely different business model. So that actually isn't representative. So, for example, Jim and myself, I work for CTCA, multiple hospitals, but our focus is oncology care. And by the way, if I have a ransomware event and people aren't treated for cancer, they will die. So this is, the impacts are severe, but how I design, how my financial structure is, everything about my organization is different from, in America, a dental office. So the way that healthcare is organized and structured within the United States varies so much that it is a completely different business model. But there are some things that we have that are the same in terms of how we address and treat it. So, for example, we have what are called healthcare ISACs in the EU. You also have ISACs that help and provide guidance, and then the FBI provides guidance that is just business agnostic. So there are some things about us that are unique.
Yeah.
And then there are a lot of things that we're just the same as everybody else.
Yeah. So that's interesting. So Jim, can I come to you on that? Also as another healthcare security practitioner, as it were. As I've talked about with Kate, IBM is trying to get a picture of this, but as she's pointed out, all the organizations will be different. How easy do you think it would be for someone like IBM to get a really solid picture of every healthcare provider and how much it all costs and what's going on?
Yeah, I think we're pretty open on the provider side in health systems to provide information. So I don't think it's a problem there. I do believe, though, it is an issue, as Kate talked about, that if you only have 1% or 5% of the respondents from a provider system with hospitals and clinics, because that's a totally different makeup than a payer system, or maybe it's a health IT company. So I didn't actually get into the details of the respondents, but yeah, I think it's going to make a difference. And I know with health systems, I've been with many health systems, we like to compare ourselves with similar size, same type of organizations. So an academic health system, we compare each other with that, and we want to know how are they, what is their risk posture, et cetera.
Yeah.
But not so much with maybe against a pharmaceutical company or health IT company, or somebody that's not necessarily in the same type of a demographic.
Yeah. I've just popped in the chat, by the way, there the actual link to the IBM report, so you can download it and scan it and have a read yourself and sort of see what went on there. But Jim, I want to stay with you very quickly on one other point from the report, which was healthcare was number one, financial services unsurprisingly number two, pharmaceuticals number three, and that caught my eye because I wondered whether the fact pharmaceuticals is such a problem and such a target, does that have knock-on effects for healthcare, or in reality are those two things sort of quite separate?
Yeah, so we have a very large specialty pharmacy organization within our provider system, and that does generate a significant amount of revenue. And so whether it's outpatient or inpatient pharmacy, particularly inpatient, where that's going to be something that's going to generate quite a bit of cash flow for the organization. So I would say that would be very important to know. Does the organization have a pharmaceutical capability or not? Because it will impact the bottom line.
That's right, and also you could end up in a survey like this. You could end up double counting almost, because you're surveying the healthcare part of a business like yours, for example, and then you end up surveying the pharmaceutical part of yours.
Yeah, if you lose that revenue, then that's going to add to the cost, as I think Richard and Avi had mentioned.
That's true. How do you drill down into what's a healthcare cost? Richard, what do you make of this then? So I'm quite interested by this ability to actually sum up the picture for healthcare. It sounds quite complicated.
It is, and in the US, size matters, right? So we've got some large healthcare providers across the US, and some very well-funded providers that are doing cutting-edge work, that have large cybersecurity teams. They have the best tools, the best finances, and the best governance around cybersecurity. And then you've got small rural hospitals, critical access facilities, for example, physician offices, dental offices, that have a lot of the medical equipment, the IoT equipment that Kate mentioned, right, in their premises, which are obviously a big area of concern for all healthcare providers. But there's a big difference in their ability to defend, deflect, and recover from an attack compared to the larger players in the space. Pharmaceutical tends to be an entirely different space. If we look at the separate pharma providers, across the world, Switzerland, the UK, US, for example, they tend to be attacked by nation states that are out to steal the pharmaceutical formulations. And in fact, at the beginning of COVID, the Secretary of State at the time, US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, actually had to threaten certain nation states about staying out of US clinical research facilities, including hospitals, and obviously pharmaceutical entities, because everyone was out to steal drug treatment formulations for COVID, right? Try and get their particular vaccine on the market first.
Well, that's true. Yes, that's true. And the subject close to my heart, the North Korean Lazarus group of hackers, or North Korean state hackers in general, I think were accused of hacking Pfizer and trying to steal COVID vaccine information from them. So, yeah. The pharmaceutical, I mean, we may end up doing a specialist thing on pharmaceuticals. It's a really interesting side issue. But for the moment, let's get back to the topic in hand. By the way, still no guesses as to where I am. I'm going to say it's west of London. So I think I got the direction wrong. It's west of London, far west of London. I'm going to drop in a clue, which is military. Yes. Avi, can I come to you on this? So you do data breach stuff and simulations and that kind of, breach simulations and so on. How easy, given what we've heard about the complexity of healthcare companies' IT estate and the different types, how easy is it to do these things for healthcare? And also, it's not like you can shut bits of the organization off, as a test. It's going to have some serious consequences. So I just wonder how easy is that for you to do breach testing?
To do breach testing. So it actually is relatively easy, because what we do is, and not just us as a vendor, other vendors in that same space, is deploy simulators throughout the environment that basically mimic what an adversary would do. And so, in a sense, it's as easy as it is for the adversaries, for the malicious actors. And that's really the reason that you should be doing that security control validation, is to know from the point of view of the adversary what they can and cannot do on your environment.
Although saying that, you can sense what the adversary would do, but in terms of working out the consequences and the bigger knock-on effects of that, okay, the adversary can get into this system here, but how would that affect clinicians? How would that affect further onward systems? How would that affect diagnoses and patient treatments? That must be quite hard to simulate, because you can, from a technical angle, what can hackers get into and what they can't, but how that affects the wider hospital network and all the ancillary and connected systems must be hard.
And that's where the art of being a CISO comes in, right? Because now that you know what the adversaries can do, as a CISO who deals with the business, and obviously in healthcare, the business is diagnosis, is the patient, you can then assess the risk and the associated cost.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah, I think I get it. Kate, can I come to you on? We'll just sort of drill down. I'm still interested in this idea of going back to the article, the kind of things that make healthcare breaches more expensive. There's obviously, we talked about the kind of insurance and litigation kind of aspect, which is really interesting. You've talked about the difficulty of getting kind of up-to-date equipment, etc. I wonder about regulation. Obviously, you're based in the US, but regulation-wise, more generally, how does that feed into the cost, and how heavily regulated? Who are you overseen by, basically, in terms of regulation?
Well, so Jim mentioned the FDA. So, for example, the medical equipment we have has to go through checks on an annual basis, but those are not cybersecurity checks. So the requirements and regulations really depend on what state you're in, as well as some of the federal oversight. But we really aren't, in terms of the protections that we need, most of our oversight is actually coming from the cyber risk insurers. They're the ones that are actually mandating some of the information security controls that we need to have in place. So I mentioned, I don't know if I mentioned, the CISA has come out with ransomware guidance. And by the way, freely available. Those of us in the US used our tax dollars to generate this information, and we are sharing it with the world. So please take a look at it. But what happens is, for us, a lot of the controls that you'll see there, or that you'll see out of the CIS Top 18, there is no actual legal requirement that we implement them. They are common practices. It's standards of due care. And then our cyber risk insurers are saying, if you don't have this in place, we're not insuring you.
Fair enough. Avi, what do you make of this? What do you want to feed in?
So I actually, I really like what the UK did with the Telecommunications Security Act that just came into effect, I think, last month. Where it's a lot more prescriptive to ISPs in this case as to what is behind due care. What do they need to do in order to really provide a level of security to their consumers? And so one of the things that I definitely like about it is, as a regulatory act, it actually has fines, it has teeth. And so if we can get that same regulation to expand to all other industries. I mean, there's nothing unique about the ISP or the telecommunication industry that should not be followed in healthcare or in finance, for that matter. To again do some very common practice or best practice as far as the regulation is concerned.
Yeah. Interesting stuff. I'm just going to quickly in the chat, we had a couple of guesses as to where I am. Hugo says Northolt military base, not there. Simon Yakan says RSG bunker Drakelow tunnels. No idea where that is, but I'm not there. I'm not in a military establishment. I'm not in a military institution, but I am in a town, or maybe it's a city, a town or a city that has big military connections. That's your next clue if you want to win the coveted teissTalk mug. And apologies, Paul tells us he's still waiting for his previous mug. Sorry about that. We will get that dispatched as soon as our Teiss Goblin is allowed out to the post office. Paul also heartily recommends the NCSC guidance for those in the UK too. Much of it written in plain English. Simon guesses all the shot. No, but getting there. Good guesses. Good guesses on that. Jim, I want to come to you on this, on the regulation point. I mean, Kate's painted a really interesting picture. Similar for you, or given the pharmaceutical thing you were talking about, are there other things that you're also regulated by in addition?
Yeah, and I was just trying to get your attention to make a comment, so thank you for calling on here. Yeah, so I would agree with Kate that regulations, security regulations in the U.S. typically tend to be more on the compliance side. So they're more of the floor versus the ceiling. Like where do you really need to be from a security perspective? Like for instance, what Richard mentioned. In the U.S., we had that in Southern California. We had that very large breach. That was $112 million of reported financial loss for that mid-sized health system, of which 97 million came from a loss of revenue. And then they were able to offset with cyber insurance 14 million. So we can see that cyber insurance is important, but it's definitely not going to doesn't resolve our issue of avoiding a big financial loss. So just to add real super quick. So so I think we're more interested in security is, we don't want to lose that $97 million. Rather than just comply with government regulations, the real interest now, because there is a big threat out there, we could be down for 3 to 4 weeks as a big health system, and therefore, not caring for patients. So that's a huge impact to the community and a massive revenue loss. So that speaks much louder than the compliance of the government, which, it's good. I'm glad that we have something there, and they are getting a little bit more prescriptive. But the fines that you would get, they pale in comparison to the total loss of revenue that you're going to experience if you have a big outage like that.
I'm gonna come to Richard and then to Kate, but before I do that quickly, Jim, I want to stay with you on that Southern California breach. That's really interesting. So it's 112 million, you said, but the insurance paid out 14 million. So that's really interesting. When you think about that, the insurer has clearly said to the healthcare provider, okay, do this and this and this. We're insuring you up to, well, they might not have said 14 million, but they said, we'll insure you. But when a push came to shove, the insurance company said, look, 14 million is all you get. All you've done is 14 million's worth of improvements. So that's interesting. So that implies that the insurers are pushing, healthcare providers to a certain amount, but they're not pushing them to the point where they're covering them for 100 mil.
Yeah, definitely. There's no such thing as 100% coverage. And actually the fact that they got 14 million, I think is pretty good. That may be all that they contracted for. And, recently the last year or two, because the cyber insurance companies themselves have had to have such large payouts, that they have changed their business model now, and so it's much more difficult to get any ransomware insurance at all. It's not surprising that many organizations are just going self-insured, or else they can't get ransomware coverage if they do the deductibles are much more larger, and the premiums are more expensive. It isn't definitely insurance is a good. Is definitely a good leading indicator, but it's not going to be a compensating way to transfer risk.
Yeah.
And Kate wanted to add something there too. But
before Kate, I'm just going to come to Richard quickly, because you wanted to make, I think, a similar point or a point about insurance. I'm interested in the healthcare application of insurance and how easy or hard that is.
Yes, a lot of healthcare entities have used insurance as a form of risk mitigation by transferring risk to insurance, as opposed to spending that money on improved cybersecurity teams and cybersecurity controls. And I think we've now reached the tipping point, as Jim alluded to here, that the costs, the premiums, which have more or less tripled in the last year because of all the ransomware attacks, have gone through the roof. They're now no longer affordable in the way that funds work. And combined with that, we now have insurers that may insure a hospital for $20 million for a breach, for example. And then they will claim some of that back, or a large part of that back, because of contributory negligence, right? They will say that you didn't do what you needed to do. You didn't have effective controls to protect against this particular concern, and therefore we will reduce the payout.
Yeah. Interesting stuff. I think, Richard, a little bit dodgy connection there, but I think we got most of you, so that's fine. Kate, can I come to you? You want to make a point on this?
Yeah, so there are a couple of pieces. And oh, by the way, Lloyd's of London has actually just recently announced a change in their ransomware insurance, and are looking at not covering when nation states are behind attacks. And in the United States, if you pay ransomware, depending on who you are paying to, it is actually a violation of federal law. But for us, a lot of what we are seeing is the cybersecurity stance, and that our investment in cybersecurity is actually coming from our boards. Our boards are paying attention and care about that. And that is part of the investment that we're making, and how we are structuring things based on their guidance and expectations, because things are changing, and information security is now something that boards care about.
Yeah. Kate, can I pick up on what you said earlier about ransomware payments? Is that because the US government, for those who don't know, has started sanctioning various ransomware organizations and also certain cryptocurrency exchanges? So the idea is you cannot make a payment to that wallet, you cannot make a payment to that ransomware gang. Is that what you're talking about when you're saying?
There's an organization called a federal organization called OFAC, and basically, if you make a payment to a terrorist organization, that is a violation of law. And then, in addition, in the state of Florida government, so any healthcare provider that is a part of a Florida government, it is now illegal to pay ransomware. Period. So So for Florida government, so these are state and local governmental entities. So
interesting. Really interesting. Really interesting that. And by the way, if you want to look at that OFAC list of cryptocurrency wallets, as I have once done, that are sanctioned, you can do that. You can also cross-reference that with account holders on a site called OpenSea, which, for those of you who looked at it, is where you buy and sell your NFTs. Obviously a massive cash cow and a big boom at the moment. And what you'll find is some of the sanctioned wallet addresses have accounts on OpenSea. Amazing. How does that happen? Potential Russian hackers buying and selling NFTs. Avi, can I come to you quickly, because I want to try and, if I can, finish on a positive note. Look, this IBM report didn't just say that healthcare had the highest breach cost, but also said that had been the case for 12 years. And I just wonder, Avi, is there a silver lining here? Is there some blue skies we can look at in terms of healthcare? Are there things the industry does that you think give hope and advice for other industries?
Yeah, I think so. I think overall, one of the things we get to see, obviously being both dealing with customers across all industries and globally, there is definitely a move to do a better job of protecting customers and organizations just by leveraging better tools. Again, I always like the saying that, in order to fix a problem, you need to be aware of it. And so awareness is a big part of it, of what is out there, what the adversaries are doing. And so all these information sharing centers, all of these government agencies that issue advisories are a huge step in getting organizations to really protect their data. So absolutely, there's a silver lining It's a matter, though, of taking the responsibility and actually acting on protecting your environment.
Yeah, interesting. I'm going to come back to Kate in a second. Before I do, I'm just going to drop another hint as to where I am. It's a special service, and if you don't get it from that, what are you thinking? Kate, can I come back to you? You mentioned the ISACs earlier, and I wanted to come back to you on that because these are the information sharing partnerships and so on. As you said, it's good. I just wonder, though, as we've established, the healthcare industry in the US is very different to healthcare in the rest of the world, a lot of other places. How much of the insight is actually going to be useful in terms of being able to share it across different territories?
Well, so part of it is the equipment we use is frequently used internationally. So a lot of the medical equipment, so, when you're talking about risk, it's vulnerabilities and threats. The threats to us are universal, and the vulnerabilities to our equipment is pretty universal. So the specifics to our medical record systems, some of the medical record systems are actually used internationally. So what happens is there is a lot of crossover, and there's and there's a lot of crossover into our third-party relationships. So an attack that causes a vulnerability, there are things that happen, and because I am alerted by my peers in the EU and in the UK, I actually am able to protect my hospitals that are in different time zones, because although hospitals are 24/7, there's a lot of things that are only happening during business hours. So it's an international threat. It really is.
Yeah, interesting. Just to where we're butting up in time, and also aware that we've had a successful answer to where I actually am at the moment. In fact, we've had two, Simon and Paul, simultaneously guessed Hereford, which leaves us, of course, with a tiebreaker as to who gets the teissTalk mug, the coveted mug. I am going to ask Simon and Paul to go head-to-head, and whoever gets the answer to this question in first wins the mug. Which country's embassy did the SAS siege back in the 80s? Which embassy did they raid to break the siege back in the 80s? And whoever gets that first gets the mug. It's a mug down. Meanwhile, I will also tell our teissTalk audience that we are back with another live event in February next year. I'm going to drop a link into the chat. 2023 is February 2020 next year. We're going to have it live in London. It was great to see everybody in November. No, it can't have been November. September. I think. It was great to see everybody in London in September when we had our event. There's one in February, the link in there. Also, hang on first. Who got it first? Simon got it first. Very good. Simon, you win the mug. Well done to you. That's going to be coming out to you hopefully soon. Get our Tice Goblin on the bicycle to the post office to courier that to you. So well done. Thanks all for your guesses. That's been good fun. I am in sunny Hereford to chat to the lovely Chamber of Commerce here in Herefordshire. Listen, that's been fantastic. Thanks to all of you. I'm just going to flag up next week on when is it? It's Tuesday next week. I'm just looking. Yes, it is Tom Langford. I just wanted to check. Usually Jenny Radcliffe does the Tuesday sessions, but she's away indisposed. So the wonderful Tom Langford is going to be doing next week's. He's got a really good topic, managing your board, which we discussed before. However, managing your board during a significant cyber incident, which is, I hope that mention is made there of getting sufficient pizza and supplies of water as you sit in front of the board for hours after hours. But look, it's a good topic, that, and a really good one. I'm sure Tom's going to have a lot of fun with it. He's got a great panel to do that as well. We are back every Tuesday and Thursday at 4 p.m. I want to thank all of our panelists today. It's been a really, really cracking one, this. I've learned, again, a load about healthcare that I didn't really necessarily know. I want to thank Kate Mullen, who's CISO at Cancer Treatment Centers of America Global, Richard Stanings, who's teaching professor at University of Denver, Jim Brady, Vice President and CISO at Cybersecurity and Risk Management, Fairview Health Services, and of course, Avi Avivi, CISO at Safe Breach. Thanks all to one and all of you. Thanks to all of you guys for watching, whether it's on catch-up or live. We shall see you again next week for another teissTalk. In the meanwhile, have a great Friday and a good weekend. From Hereford, cheerio, and thanks to all of you.
Have a good one.
Thank you.